of the Smart Talk. We will hear from Assistant Chief Dan Rodriguez of Farmington Hills Police Department in Michigan to review online safety risks to look out for. Then we're going to kind of deviate a little bit from the Smart Talk and talk with Farmington Area PTA Council about how they have been able to make effective community connections to provide expert speakers on different topics. And then we're going to turn back into the Smart Talk and speak with a member from Ohio PTA about the impacts of having the Smart Talk has had within her own family. And we'll also look at the ins and outs of the Smart Talk and then open the floor up for some Q&A. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Dan Rodriguez. He is the Assistant Chief of Police for the city of Farmington Hills in Michigan. He's a 27-year veteran of the police department with a diverse background in investigations and community policing. Dan is also an adjunct professor at the University of Michigan, Dearborn, where he teaches cyber crimes and digital evidence. All right, Dan.
Thank you, Melissa. I appreciate that. And I'm excited to be here today with everybody on this, in Michigan, very cold and frigid Friday evening. But we're going to warm it up with some cyber talk, which is one of my favorite topics, as you guys have seen. It is something that I teach at the university to undergraduate students. A little bit more too about myself. I'm not just a police officer. I'm also a parent and someone who has raised 3 children and one who's wrapping up her high school years. And so I have been now, because of the age of my kids, I've been kind of at the sort of the beginning of this cyber engagement that we see today. What I mean by that is when my children were coming up, the ability to connect to your smartphone was just happening, right? So the social media explosion that you had now on your phone as opposed to your laptop or your computer just started to happen. So I am also learning. And so I hope that tonight I'll be able to not just engage in a conversation about safety and security as far as a law enforcement perspective, but also as a fellow member of parenting, because this is something that we all have to be engaged in, and it is certainly something new in our society. So again, thank you for this opportunity for the PTA and also from all of you who have come tonight. We've been able to do this in my own community, and I'll give an opportunity for the Farmington Area PTA Council to talk about that a little bit later. So today what we're going to start to talk about is our safety, right? Taking charge of our digital life. So here's a little bit of a pop quiz. What does it mean to be safe online? And what does respect online look like? And you're more than welcome to either open up your mic and you can certainly put it into the chat. We have the chat open as I put in these pop quizzes. But again, what do these things look like when we're talking about doing it online? And then what does family values mean? So these 3 questions when it comes to online, I think a lot of times we have a lot of different definitions based on where we're from, maybe our culture, maybe our region. The thing about the online experience is that it's almost very similar in a lot of places because we are connected virtually now, as opposed to the way we were before. One of the themes that you're going to hear me talk about today is we're going to be talking about that online neighborhood. The online neighborhood is no different than your neighborhood, right? Wherever you're from across the United States, the online neighborhood is a little bit of how I put in perspective how to be safe online. Okay, now our next slide. So making sure your online data and your personal and financial information is secure is very important. So being aware of your potential online risks and doing things to prevent yourself from being a victim to online predators is what we consider online safety. Remember, we all leave a digital footprint. Every single one of us who is connected online, which in this country's most Americans are now connected online. So making sure that our data is especially our personal information is secure and preventing it from falling into the hands of other people is what we're talking about when we're discussing about online safety. Again, I don't care if you're buying something at the store or if you're just signing on and looking for something on, say, Google or some other web browser, we always have a digital footprint. Okay. Online respect. So respect means things to different people. So not making mean comments, maybe not posting images of others without permission, and maybe not sharing chats or emails or other content that was shared privately is kind of what we're talking about when we're talking about online respect. Those are certainly things that we can do in the physical world, but when it comes to online respect, these are the kinds of ground rules that we're trying to establish. Our family values. So the principles that help your family decide what's right and wrong and how to act in various situations is what each and every one of us consider our family values. They are the shared beliefs that your family holds as important about what is right and wrong. And then those are the rules that help us guide our actions. And each of us probably have very similar family values, and they may differ a little bit. But again, most of it comes down to what's right and what's wrong. Now, again, when we're talking about online safety and we're talking about living in that neighborhood, that cyber or online virtual neighborhood, right and wrong can seem very simple to us adults, but may not be always the case for our children. And so certainly this is one of those discussions that we have to have as a family when we come together to talk about online safety. So let's take a poll. All right. Let's take a look at, and you'll see that there's an online poll for you to go ahead and take it on these questions that we have. So do you spend more than 2 hours online outside of work or school? And I'm just going to go through the questions real quick, and you can go through the poll yourself. Do you use privacy settings to protect your information? And how about location services to check in to your places? For instance, when I go out, my social media director, who I'm married to, she's very good at it. She checks us in so that, we can show that we're somewhere and maybe give, some comments on the place that we're eating at, for example. How about your friends? How about people you don't know? Do you friend people that you don't know? How about following each other's social media? Do we follow each other on social media as far as your children, parents? Do your parents follow you? And then do you know what everyone in your house is doing and saying online? And then a bonus question, are you happy with how much time your family spends on your devices? So go ahead and take your online poll and submit it. And I think you'll be surprised sometimes, as we've been doing this in our own district. Kids, have their opinions, and we certainly want them to be engaged in this poll to see what they have to say. And for parents, I think you'll be surprised sometimes what your kids have to say about your online usage. I know it is for me. It is something that we have to pay attention. And honestly, this is one of those endeavors that I've had to kind of partake myself. And the one that I'm talking about the most is, am I happy with how much time I'm spending on my digital device? Law enforcement's a 24-hour job. And now it's become a 24-hour job in my cell phone, and I take it home with me, especially in the role that I have in my police department. And so I use that sometimes I'll say it, I use it as an excuse. I got to check my emails, what's going on at work. When in reality, maybe I don't have to. So as you can see here, as the poll results come in, I think a lot of us are taking steps. And the one that I find interesting here is, do you follow your family members? There's still some that don't. I like this one, the number 7. Do you know exactly what your family members are doing online? It's almost split right down the middle. And I'll be very honest with you. I can teach this stuff all day long. I can tell you the hazards of online crime and cybersecurity, but I don't always know what my kids have done online. And it's certainly a challenge for us to be engaged in that conversation. So again, when you look at the results, 100% of us are doing a lot of what we should be doing. But so there's still some of us that aren't necessarily maybe aware of it. The one about checking into places, 75% of you said that you do not use your location service to check into places. And so that's good too. That's one of those ones where, like I said, I might check in, not everybody knows where I'm at, including my coworkers who asked me how dinner was when I went out on the weekend. So, it's a good conversation piece, but it's also something that could put you, vulnerable to some form of crime. Oh, Alyssa, you got to unmute yourself.
Thank you. I had helicopters flying that I was trying to block out. One of the things we do at National PTA is when we design new programs, we like to try to test them out with PTAs across the country. And this fall, we had the opportunity to test out some virtual online safety events with Farmington Council in Michigan. And that is how we learned about this great community partnership that exists between the police department and the council PTA. And we wanted to bring that opportunity for Farmington Council to talk about how they establish great community partnerships. We know one of the things that many PTAs struggle with are finding expert speakers, and we're really excited tonight to share the floor with Farmington Council to talk about that. So I would like to introduce you all to Nancy Jennings. She is the Vice President of Enrichments for Farmington Area PTA Council, as well as the Vice President for North Farmington High School PTSA, and Jen Garland. She is on the Michigan PTA Board of Directors and Advocacy Committee, as well as the Farmington Area PTA Council, where she's the Vice President of Advocacy and the North Farmington High School PTSA Council Representative. Thank you all for joining us tonight. So as I was saying, Farmington Council has established a strong positive connection with Assistant Chief Rodriguez and the Farmington Hills Police Department. Can you share how did your PTA Council establish this connection?
Well, I think you need to start by understanding what we are. Farmington Area PTA Council is a district level PTA that represents 15 PTAs and PTSAs in the cities of Farmington and Farmington Hills, Michigan. So we have two cities. So as the district level PTA, we provide advocacy training and support to our constituent units and serve as their liaisons to the state and national PTAs. And we have a close working relationship with the Farmington Public School District and the Board of Education, the administrations of both of our cities, and many community organizations and other PTA councils nearby. So when we first got our first PTA Connected grant, we asked the Chief of Police if the Farmington Hills Police Department would participate in our May 2019 in-person Digital Families event. And Chief Nebus suggested that Assistant Chief Rodriguez would be ideal because this is in his area of expertise, obviously. And then once he had moderated our in-person event, it was natural for us to come back and ask him when we piloted the digital version last December to come back and reprise his role. But we also wanted to say here that in your community, the right person could be found in many different organizations. It could be a social worker, a school counselor, someone in the local health department. We even had someone with this kind of expertise in our intermediate school district that individual schools could call on. So the important thing is to ask. And then once you've found somebody, establish and maintain connections with the organizations that have similar goals to yours. And this is advocacy.
Yeah, that's really great. One of the things we know is that so many PTA leaders want to make those connections, and it's really hard to just start with that ask. And it's just good to hear that when you do ask, lots of times you get these great relationships that you can establish. So one of the other questions I wanted to ask you all is, when you make that ask and you start to bring in a speaker for your PTA, how did you work together to to share the goals of what the session was going to be and really get on the same page with the talking points as to what you were going to be delivering to your PTA community.
So I actually have that answer too. Nancy and I were going to take turns, but you've reordered the questions. So for both the in-person and the online events, we provided Assistant Chief Rodriguez with the materials from National PTA. But in both instances, we gave him permission and asked him to update the materials as he saw fit to give, you know, specific talking points about our community, and, you know, allowed him to add what he felt was important to add. And we did that for all of our speakers. For the second event, we spent a lot of time modifying the materials in two ways. First, we had to, you know, make them fit the new online format. And then we tailored them to the specific presenters for each topic. You know, each presenter had a slightly different style or expertise level. And so, so that was the important thing, is just to be flexible and, you know, make sure that you you work with your volunteers and make them happy and thank them afterwards so that they come back.
It's always good. And then to just bring it back, how did you train Assistant Chief Rodriguez up on the PTA and the needs of your school community?
So one of the things that we wanted to stress as we were sharing our experience with the group is that this was not, because this was not a one-off experience, we didn't really have to spend a great deal of time explaining what our needs were beyond that particular program that we had asked for input with. Our work has been, we share regularly with our city officials as well as our police department or our fire department. They have been regular speakers at our PTA council meetings. We participate regularly and intentionally, I would say, in activities that the city provides, making sure that somebody from PTA council is in attendance. We have a great partnership with our schools and our community leaders. So all of that is to say that trying to ensure that they knew what our needs are or about us was really not something that we had to spend a great deal of time on. And as Chief Rodriguez introduced himself, he has a great deal of knowledge because of the work he does, not only with the department, but in his role as a professor. So the real message, I think, is about the bigger picture of finding the right connection, whoever that is in your community. I think too often we're afraid to ask, and it's really a lot easier to do that than you think. Every city runs a little differently. So it's finding the right person within your city structure or police department structure or community or county. We know out there are a lot of political, a lot of governmental entities that are run countywide, but there is a social worker or a police officer or a it might even be someone from within the school community that's tasked with safety that you can find that will help you identify who those experts are in your community, because it does have to, it has to be the right fit for where you come from.
Yeah, and that fit might be different from year to year too, depending on just what's going on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Although we are very fortunate. Don't go anywhere, Chief Rodriguez. We have a great deal of tenure. So that really helps. I mean, that's a really good point. Our police chief had been here for quite a while and was really familiar with PTA Council and Farmington Public Schools. So that was pretty easy. The person that took over for him, Chief Nevis just retired. That person has also been in our community for 25 years. So we recognize that we are extremely fortunate, and that might not be everybody's experience. And where there is turnover, yes, you're going to have to continue to work on those connections. But I can share that anyone that puts in that effort, you will see the bigger picture payoff, not just for events like this, but for other things. We find that it really attracts people to our PTA council meetings when we have these citywide or broad speakers able to talk to bigger picture things than maybe some of our more specific issues within a school building.
Yeah. Before we close out this section, I just wanted to make sure, I think you did address some of these points, but just in case you wanted to add anything to it, how do you keep this relationship going? As you were saying, that Chief Rodriguez has presented at multiple events for your council. Are there any specific pointers about like, how do you, once you reach out for that partnership and you start it, how do you keep it going?
I think the fact, making sure that it's reciprocal. So most communities host things about safety, fire safety for kids, come check your car seat. You know, there's different events that are very common in most communities. Making sure someone from your PTA, or if you're a PTA council community, your PTA council attends one of those and identifies themselves, so that you're present for them as well as you're asking them to be present for you. We have 4 meetings a year, so we try and make sure that those meetings that we are inviting someone from law enforcement to speak. So that's a regular reason to reach out and arrange for what's good timing for that. And then we also sort of put ourselves adjacent to, maybe there's something in a particular school community. A couple of years ago, our middle school community hosted a forum on gun safety. So again, that was another reason for outreach. Which here is making it relevant and consistent will pay off in the long run.
Yeah, that's really great. And I just want to reiterate what you all were saying, that like there are many people who can be experts in the digital safety space, and that also includes your own students. So I spoke at the beginning that you could even have a student panel to talk about these things. We often know that students are like the first line of defense. They're going to be the ones who raise the red flag when things are going wrong for you as well. So while this relationship specifically is between a police department for digital safety education, that the community outreach tactics that Farmington Council shared are ones that you can use throughout all kinds of community partners that you could reach out to. So thank you all so much for coming and sharing tonight. It's super important to hear from you all and to make sure that we keep these relationships going. If you were attending a Smart Talk event at a school within our facilitator guides, we would now move from the portion of the event where it is education to learning about the tool. So I'm going to go back into slides, which will take me just 1 second. All right. Okay, so the Smart Talk. So what you're seeing on your screen now is the Smart Talk moving through. So the Smart Talk is an online interactive contract. It was the first tool that National PTA developed in partnership with Norton LifeLock and Common Sense Media to support families in living healthy and happy online lives. Last year, we completed a 5-year refresh of the tool to provide guidance on location sharing. So as you can see, it is a contract and it guides you through the different areas of digital safety. So when you open it up, you can pick one area or you can do all of the areas at one time. It gives you questions and it helps you to establish those guidelines for being safe online. And then it also helps you to continue have this the digital conversation with your child as they grow. So you can come back and do the Smart Talk again later on. You can set up how many times you want to do it, and you can talk about that at the very end of the contract as well. So we suggest that parents have the Smart Talk with their kids. Initially, this was a conversation that we were saying that you have when you give your kid their first connected device, but now in our post-COVID world, we know that many kids are having multiple connected devices for school. So it's even more important to have this conversation earlier on. So you can see it's pretty open-ended. You can scale the conversation up and scale the conversation back, depending on how old your child is and what exactly it is that they will be experiencing online. So this is a conversation, as we were saying, that grows with your family and one that should be revisited. As you're seeing there, you could select it. And then to provide families with the time to have this conversation, we have the programmatic event so that that way you're getting the education and then you are practicing everything that you just talked about. So like the poll that Assistant Chief Rodriguez ran through, you get to see where people are kind of sitting within your community, talk about it, and then allow families to go and have their own conversations at home to figure out what it is that they exactly want to set for their own ground rules. You do notice that at the end of the Smart Talk, it kind of ran through it before I got to it in my talking points, but there is an option to print. This is a pretty crucial thing to point out, that the Smart Talk does not take any of your data. There is no putting in an email address. There is nothing that is collected from it, which is why to keep it, you will need to print it as a PDF and save it onto your computer so you can print straight to whatever device that you are using it on. We do know that some parents use it as a background. Other people print it out and put it on their refrigerator. But you will have everything that you checked off compiled into this PDF for you so that you can revisit it and check on it and make sure that you hold each other accountable to the rules that you set. So we wanted to, because we know in this virtual world that it is not exactly easy for people to go and have a family conversation in the moment and then come back, we wanted to bring a family to you all that has had the Smart Talk to share what that experience was like for them. And with that, I'm going to introduce Nicole Lesnick. Nicole is a bit of a PTA maven. She is on the board of many, many local PTAs and is also very active with Ohio PTA. Hi, Nicole. Thanks for being here tonight.
Click the wrong button. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
So Nicole, what was it like for your family to do the Smart Talk?
Well, when we first had the Smart Talk, it was about a year ago in the pre-COVID times, and it was a little bit different than the one we had the other day. My kids had been, online playing video games here and there. My older kids had like Snapchat and Instagram to spread information with their friends and to connect with them. And then we got shut down. So then it would be really crucial that they were on their devices connecting with each other, and then we were doing a lot of school online as well. And then we came into the fall and we were still online, and we went back for a little bit, then we came back home, and now we were all back to school 5 days a week, which is very exciting for me, but very exciting for them as well. So my girls and I have 8 children. So my 4 littlest are 4th grade and under, the 4th, 2nd, 1st, and preschool. And then my older 4, which are my bigs, are 6th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, and 12th grade. So we're like using every kind of different piece of device, and we're using, different ways of communicating with each other. Like, we're all over the place. So having the talk with each group of kids was very important. The first time we had it all together. So I just had it again with my girls, who are my bigs, this past week, and we talked about how, when we went through the Smart Talk and we went through checking through the checklist and everything, and on their phones, they're able to tell how much time they spend in a particular app. And I found out that my 14-year-old spends an average of 5 hours a day on Snapchat. And I was blown away because I did not know, how the heck do you have enough time with that for school? And she's like, well, Mom, I don't text people, I snap them. And I'm like, okay. So I didn't really get that, but she kind of explained it to me. And the same thing with Instagram, it's your showing all these pictures and sharing information. But for my kids, they really, I think looking at how much time they spent really opened their eyes to how much time they are actually spending online, not realizing, you're in the car and you're snapping someone. And we talked about, if somebody tries to contact you that you don't know. And my daughter told me that, in the same one who's online quite a bit, told me that she was catfished by a kid because he he started talking to her and she's like, yeah, I don't know you and I want to talk to you. And then he created a new profile to talk to her. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is crazy. And she's never met this kid before. And I would have never thought. And I was kind of heartbroken because I'm like, well, why didn't you tell me? She's like, Mom, I handled it. And I'm like, well, we're going to talk about this. And this is now in our contract of, you will tell me if something, crazy like this happens. But it was nice to see how, who uses, their location, a lot of times they'll say, oh, well, my friend is nearby because they're using their location device or the location thing. And then my other daughter, who is 15 and quite the opposite, is like, I don't tell anybody anything. I'm like, you are the one I love. I love them all equally, but I was like, thank you so much for following the rules. So it was great. It was an eye-opening conversation for me as well as for them, because I don't think either one of them realized how much time the other one was spending. They might snap each other from a different room. But I thought it was definitely very eye-opening, and I'm glad that we didn't have the talk just once and that we revisited it. And we probably will revisit it again in a month just to see if that 5-hour average got down a little bit. And they also, because they're like, Mom, you're on your phone all the time too, they decided to go into my settings and set on there. So in a month, I'll be able to tell how much time I'm using Facebook and whatnot. So it's exciting, I guess, for them too, to be able to compare what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we would hear in person at these events is we would always see the light bulb moments as families were having these conversations together. And it's one of those things that's really valuable too as a community. So even just hearing you talk about it tonight, I'm sure that there are people who are having similar light bulb moments where they're like, oh, I didn't even think about that. And Nicole, I think you might be able to share with this too, having just recently taken the Smart Talk, but the questions are all posed in kind of a positive, proactive manner to help kids open up about these conversations so that you're not approaching them in a negative light. It's more of a exploratory, we're going to learn about one another way.
No, absolutely. They were all definitely in a positive way. And it didn't I didn't feel like I was shaming my daughter for her 5 hours online. Even though I feel like I might be right now, it was just eye-opening for all of us, because it's those times add up. And I asked her, I'm like, well, how many times are you going to the bathroom? She's like, Mom, I don't use it while I'm in the bathroom. I'm like, lies. I'm like, you have to, I hope you're not snapping people in the bathroom, but that is, I remember being a kid and reading a book. Wow, you guys know a lot about me, but that's fine. But it's that's, where are people using their phones? And yeah, it was very eye-opening, I think, for all of us to realize how much technology we are carrying around in our back pocket all the time.
Right. And Nicole, I don't know if you can think back to when you had the event with your PTA. Was there any differences you saw within the PTA community after hosting the Smart Talk?
Well, absolutely. And our talk was right before the everything COVID hit. It was just a week or two beforehand. And it was, I don't think any of us knew how much time we were going to be spending online. But I think that it definitely helped in just knowing what are my kids going to. I was able to pay more attention to what sites that they were going to, and what even stuff that they're listening to on YouTube or playing, for my littles, they play a lot of Fortnite, and the way that kids talk to each other on there, we have to have the discussion of, okay, those words are not appropriate, or, you can't say things to somebody because they made you mad in a video game. So lots of good conversation came out of having that initial smart talk and in public, and then having my friends afterwards, when we were all still able to get together, we were able to talk my gosh, I had no idea how much time even we little kids are spending online. So it was really good. And the flip side is we also were able to talk and find good resources to share with each other. So good places for kids to work on, their reading and skills or their math skills. So it was nice to share that information as well.
That's great. So one of the things that we had heard in designing PTA connected programming was that most of the times people think that you need to be an expert in online safety to have these conversations. And I think that everybody who is on the call tonight can tell you that we're all experts at some level at this, that you don't need to feel like you have a degree in digital safety to do that. But we do want to help support PTAs in meeting their needs. So one of the things that we have worked on with Norton LifeLock this year was to create some videos, actual people who would have the title of digital safety expert within their company to provide kind of short vignettes that a PTA could use in hosting a Smart Talk event. So if you're unable to get a speaker or don't feel comfortable running a student panel, you could use one of these videos. You could also use these videos to start the conversation by just emailing them out to your members and then following up also with the Smart Talk and saying, here, have a little bit of some new information and take some action and start this conversation with your family. So I am actually going to reshare this because I realized that I did not add the ability to play sound. We will do that. So we're going to watch a short video from them so you can see what that looks like.
Hi, I'm Paige Hansen, Chief of Cyber Safety Education at Norton LifeLock. Today I want to go through a few tips on how to keep your device nice and safe. The first thing we want to do is patch early and patch often. What that means is these devices right here constantly have updates for good reason. We want to make sure that your operating system is up to date and also the apps. See, developers push out updates to help keep us safe. So whether you do it automatically, which is something that I do, that's the best practice to automatically do it, or you go in every day to check for updates and then go ahead and update them, that is going to keep your device a lot more safe. The next thing you want to consider is setting a short lock period. Now, what that means is, okay, I'm going to unlock my device here. Okay, it's unlocked. Now, when I set this device down, it's going to lock within 30 seconds. The benefit of having it lock within 30 seconds is that if I were to get up and...
All right, it looks like I'm having slight technical difficulties. Did I lose everybody?
Leave my seat or somebody were to steal it when it was unlocked, they could potentially have access to my social media apps, my email, my contacts, and so on. And think of the nefarious things that somebody might be able to do if they were to get hold of my device. I mean, my entire life is on here. So best practice is to have a 30-second lock period. That's something that you can find in the settings of your device. And so anything longer is just leaving the door wide open for criminals to really wreak havoc on your device if they were to get a hold of it. We also recommend a lock code. What that means is, yes, I have Face ID on my phone. Maybe some of you guys have the fingerprint, but either way, there's also a lock code. The lock code, we want to make sure that it's at least 6 digits. Or if it's an Android device, 6 different ways we're moving dots that we are unlocking our code. You see, with the right technology, fraudsters can get in your phone if it's a 4-digit lock code within seconds. And the longer the lock code, the harder it is for these fraudsters to get in. Best practice is 6, but if you can use up to 10, that really makes it harder for fraudsters to get in. And lastly, we want to review those permissions again. What that means is we want to go into our permission settings, our location, our apps using our location all of the time. See, that's something we don't necessarily need. You know, a weather app or an app that you use for your grocery store doesn't need your location all of the time. There's a very number of maybe not even a handful of apps that need your location all of the time, with the exception of maybe a Find My Phone app or maybe a tracking app that a teen might have on their phone by their parents. That might be the only exception. So we want to review those permissions. Do you allow your contacts to be able to be seen by your apps, your calendar, and those things? really not needed. So we want you to go into those permission settings and review them. See if you define them as risky, and then change it if you do.
All right. So with the PTA Connected Smart Talk program, you have access as a PTA member to all of the materials to help you facilitate an event, whether that is an in-person event or one like we are doing tonight, which is a distance learning event, or even an event that is at your own pace and you're emailing things out. We have all of the wraparound resources for your PTA to use. And that's at pta.org/PTA Connected or pta.org/safer internet, which will bring you to the page from this week's events. And you can go down to Friday and click over and link straight through to everything. And with that, I did want to open up the floor to any Q&A. So if anybody had any questions that you haven't already put in the chat, or we're a small enough group tonight if you wanted to come off of mute to ask your question. Heather, was there a question that you had seen that you wanted to bring up?
Sure. I don't want to put the attendee on the spot. It's just, I think someone was hoping to have a little bit more specific information about digital safety. But I do not see a question. I wanted to see, I don't want to say her name because again, I don't want to put her on the spot. But you can either type your question into the chat and we can just read it, or again, everybody is welcome to either raise their hand. That's a fun feature, or you can just raise your hand on the video too. And you know, we can get your questions answered. Looks like Melanie has a question.
Hi, Melanie.
Hi. This internet safety presentation, has that been done in high school? Did I miss that?
Mm-hmm.
And how was that?
So I have, I don't know if there's anybody on the call run the presentation with the high school.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Okay, so we have run probably about 400 PTA connected events across the country through the National PTA programs. And of that, I would say about 10% of them have been run with high school PTSAs. And you can age gate them up, which is what's great about how flexible the programming is because of looking at choosing who your speaker is. One of the things that we see is the most successful at the high school level is that student panel portion. And we've seen really great success in PTSAs partnering with community colleges to really bring in kind of that older level to the high school kids about online safety. And there is a facilitator's guide on how to run a panel at your PTSA. And also, I mean, you can work with the students who are in the school too. Lots of times student council would love to step up and kind of run that. And you can do a combination as well. So if there is a specific topic that you want to address and pull in an expert like Chief Rodriguez or another type of online safety expert, you can combine both of those things and have a direct speaker and a panel. And I think, Nicole, some of your kids are of the older age, and you were talking about having the Smart Talk with them as well. So it does work for older kids because the questions are pretty open. I don't know if you want to talk about that, Nicole.
Sure. Having the Smart Talk with my older kids was probably more productive than my little kids. But it was nice just to see they were definitely open to talking to me about what they do online and what their friends do online. when we did it for our school, we did it for elementary ages, but we had all sorts of families there with all their different age children. I definitely think, as recommended, having the kid panel or the student panel will be fantastic, because then you get the information from the peers. And like, I didn't know how big and like Snapchat is, or even like with TikTok, like I don't understand it all, and there's new things that come out all the time. So definitely look into getting some student perspectives on there, just so that you can have the most current type of smart talk.
Great. I do have a question for Assistant Chief Rodriguez. Are you able to break down what types of things parents need to look out for about online safety for young kids versus high school kids? Is there any advice on what to do for those different ages? Is there like one specific thing that you would share?
Well, for starters, if you have younger kids, you're at an advantage, I think, then if you're just starting out with some older kids. Like I said before, with my personal experience, if you can start digital safety at a younger age, especially because it's a conversation that we're having often, an advantage. It's that engagement, that conversation where you're involved in their digital life, that I think is going to get you, more information. Because the reality is kids oftentimes, as they get older, they want to do what? They want to grow up, they want to grow out. They don't necessarily want mom and dad involved in every little aspect of their lives. And so it becomes more difficult the older you get. I find that the younger children setting up their devices, using some of the parental controls that are in, not only from your carrier, whether it's your online carrier for your internet provider or your cell phone provider. There's things that they provide you that you can put in place when you give your child their first digital device, or you set up maybe their computer that they might be using, like for example now for school. And then the older they get, again, it's a little bit more difficult, because it's more about having that relationship with them when you're talking about what they have. This is one of the really hard ones that I deal with, and I am torn, because I do want to give my kids their autonomy, but providing them with that safe zone is hard, because I think it's important for us to be able to know what is on their devices, because the dangers that we're seeing from law enforcement is they are having, and this is where I think, if I had to answer your question, understanding what apps they have, understanding which ones they are downloading are important, because most social media applications today have a chat. Even if we went on Pinterest, for example, right? I'm looking at just ideas for home improvement. There's a chat version. There's a chat function or feature on Pinterest. Well, a lot of people don't know that there are conversations that happen on Pinterest. There's chats. And so that's where sometimes the children become victims of any type of crime, is through these chats, right? So my advice to everyone is on their devices, have access to their devices, know how to get into them. And then especially when they're younger, setting them up with, whether it's software, because there's a lot of software, and then there's a lot of apps. It's as simple as just sometimes getting on your own device and doing a search, and just, whatever device you have, a search for, parental controls, parental software, parental safety. And you'll be surprised. Most of them are free. There are a few that you might have to pay a little bit for, but they're well worth it. And again, it's just understanding what apps that they have. I'm going to go back to an earlier conversation that we were talking about, like, who do I talk to as far as information goes, and bringing in other stakeholders, because it's not just about law enforcement. And I think that's a good idea, is bringing in people from, the private sector, other, areas of expertise, because, law enforcement, we don't have all the answers. My suggestion to anybody here tonight and going forward is, all across the country, we have what's called the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. It is a combination of federal, local, state law enforcement partners who come together to investigate really dangerous crimes that happen against children. Now, they provide also a lot of resources, information. So if you're looking for more information, I mean, you're in a different state, just Google internet crimes against children, and you'll start seeing, you probably even see your own task force in your state and your region, and they do provide a lot of information. Here in Michigan, the Michigan State Police runs it, and you can go to their website. And again, there's resources. And the nice thing about it is that it's tailored to age. And it's also resources that will help parents too, because there's information there for parents.
And just expanding on the internet crimes against, the ICAC task force has a really amazing tool for school districts in helping to like set up parameters as far as how schools respond to things that happen online. And with almost everybody learning online in some capacity, it is a really amazing resource for districts to use too. So definitely look into them. They are, if you go to our PTA Connected page, they are linked there as one of our partners as well. And I think Chief Rodriguez answered this naturally in your what you were just talking about, but the how do parents keep up? So I heard you talk about talking with your kid about what they're doing, asking about the apps that they want to have, keeping up yourself on the apps, using the tools and resources that are on devices already that exist. Both Androids and iPhones have different versions of kind of family software for parents and kids to use to check on what those app usages are. And is there any other things that you would add to that?
Well, like all the ones that you mentioned, Norton, is a partner here tonight, also has some very, very good software. Remember, most of the time at home, your Wi-Fi router also is what they're connecting to, and there are things that you can set up to see what kind of traffic is running through your Wi-Fi. It's always good from a cybersecurity aspect because you don't want outsiders necessarily to be connecting to your Wi-Fi without knowing it. So going on to that, knowing how to look at what's coming through your Wi-Fi router is important. Look, most cops are naturally suspicious of everything, right? And then I have 2 daughters, so they've probably been pulling their hair out because dad's always paying attention to what's going on. I also worked in an undercover capacity for a very long time, so I also know how to be very secretive about it. And just paying attention, looking, I hate to say this, but over the shoulder, asking some questions. Again, I'm not an expert at it, and this is one of those things where you have to just sort of learn to have that conversation naturally. I will say this, moms do it a lot better than dads, because especially when it would come to girls, with me, but my wife does. And so again, there's so many things that we can do. And again, if you have younger children, I think do it right away. Make them understand that you're certainly there to help protect them. That's what you're doing. An example of that is my family. I had a case that I worked on where it's kept me up at night. If the family had, even just the Find My Phone application on their phone for their daughter, they may have been able to find her, and she went missing. And so when I tell that story to my family, it was one of the reasons when I was like, listen, it's just one more piece of technology that we can use to keep us safe. And they take it as, hey, you're snooping on me. But once I kind of explained it to them, and this was a very tragic case, we can use these things to our advantage. And a lot of times it's just getting them to understand that.
Yeah, actually know some adults who use the kind of different Find My Phone types of things for each other, especially they live in a large city, and just checking in with one another. It's really helpful. Melanie, did you want to ask a question?
Just as a follow-up to that, he said to Find My Phone, and I was also thinking of Life 360, where you can track where your kids are, but they have to have their location turned on. So isn't that kind of a difficult conflict in a sense?
Absolutely. That is the challenge. Because, you know, they'll shut it off.
Right.
And again, you're into this kind of, this battle sometimes about, hey, why'd you shut off your location? It's hard, but again, I'm a parent, so I sympathize with everybody here. You know, it is just trying to get them to understand. You know, and I have a conversation with my, especially now that my kids are all older, and it's like, listen, you can always call me if you're in a position where you're uncomfortable or something's going on and you feel like you're getting in trouble. I promise you, I will not judge you. We'll have a conversation the next day, but it's trying to build that trust, and it is so hard at those teenage, you know, levels when you're in middle school, between middle school and high school, and then they're starting to drive. My advice is just keep at it, keep trying to be actively involved in their lives, especially digitally.
And I'm going to just point back to the Smart Talk again, and how you can kind of start those conversations not about something that you're already having friction on. You can pick an area that is a little bit more of an easy terrain to start with. You don't have to do the whole thing at once if you know that there's a thing that you're going to wind up in an argument about, and kind of open up the conversations from there. Another question came in about, is there an app, and I actually don't know the answer to this, that parents can use to take random screenshots of a connected device in family linked accounts? So that to me sounds like kind of like taking over another device for a screenshot.
There are so many apps that do these. That's considered what we call spyware, right? It has a kind of a scary name, but they do exist. The only thing that I would recommend if you're going to be looking at something like that is pay attention to the recommendations. Take a good look at the agreement. A lot of us, when we're online, we don't pay attention to what that online agreement is. We just like, yep, I agree, because it's just one more thing that I have to click to get past the screen so I can move on. But pay attention to those things, because they're good for monitoring our kids and what they're doing, but they also open up the door for potential other people to come in and do the same thing. And that's not just because they're going to be able to watch your kid, but that they're also, what they're doing when you're allowing these things into your devices is that they're allowing one more key to personal information. Maybe not your child's, but maybe even yours if they're on your network. There's so much stuff out there. I don't have one in particular. I would say do your homework. And these are things that could be done in a simple Google Bing search. And what I do and what I recommend is see what others have said. See if there's recommendations. When you're doing it in app, whether it's through Apple or Android, find out what people are saying about it and scroll through those. And if there's a lot of them and then there's a good rating, you probably have something that's successful and it's being used by a lot of people.
That makes a lot of sense. We are at a full hour, so thank you all for joining tonight. I really hope that you found something valuable and that you're able to share the Smart Talk with your community. Have a wonderful weekend and a happy Valentine's Day to everybody. Have a good one.